Chapter 11, The First Olive. In every business, it is an axiom that the first sale is the hardest. It is like the first olive out of the bottle, or a maid's first kiss. After it, the rest come easily. And nowhere is this truer than in selling by mail. When you buy mail to interest a man in your product, your most difficult task to win his confidence, his belief in your statements. That is the reason for the free trial offer. That is what makes necessary the money-back guarantee. So when you have made one sale to a man, your hardest jot done. From then on, your real profits should begin. Where it will have cost you 10, 20, or even 50% of your selling price make the first sale, your second one should seldom cost you more than 5 or 10%. Why? Because your customer believes in you. You have sold him something. It has proved to be all you claim for it. Therefore, he feels safe in trusting anything you may say to him in the future. That is why the big mail order houses will cheerfully spend several dollars to get a customer's first order. That is why experienced users of the mail oftentimes offer to the general public only small units of sale like $1 or $2, knowing that a man will much more readily take a chance on a low-priced item with someone he does know, and that a satisfactory transaction at this low figure tend to establish confidence just as surely as a big sale. The new process company of Warren Paw, as an instance, used a $1 lot of initialed handkerchiefs to build a customer list quickly. WMH Wise & Comers of New York sold the Elbert Hubbard scrapbook at $2 or $3, and then to the resultant customers they sold a good many thousand sets of the $100 Little Journeys. At Collier's, we started with our highest price sale because we happened to have on hand a couple of 100,000 old inquiries which had expressed an interest in that set. Then we had won their confidence. We sold them other sets. The first was the Harvard Classics Shelf of Fiction, a logical follow-up to the classics themselves. There were 20 volumes in bindings to match the 5-foot shelf. A first circularizing of the classics buyers bought something like 10% of orders. Since the circular in the mail cost us less than 3.5 cents each, 10% meant that our orders were costing us only about 35 cents apiece, or less than 2% of our selling price. That is nothing unusual for a first follow-up to customers who have been sold by mail. Once you have won your customer's confidence with an article that has done all you promised for it and more, you should be able to sell 10% of your customer list any related product. Of course, if you keep going back at them every month, as the new process company frequently does, you are not going to sell 10% each time. But if your offering is something a large percentage of your customers can use to advantage, you will get a profitable volume of orders every time. To realize this, you have only to look at the letter and circular which pulled such good returns on the Harvard Classics Shelf of Fiction. There is nothing outstanding about either of them. The circular especially is not at all what I would send if I were making the offer now. There is little about it to intrigue the interest. Just compare it with some of the circulars we used on Wells's Outline of History, or O. Henry, or Simon's History of the War. Yet it pulled. Why? Because in selling them the Harvard Classics, we had already won the reader's interest in any later related offer we might make. For that reason, an ordinarily good letter with a rather uninteresting circular pulled extraordinarily profitable returns. Here is the letter. You are an owner of the Harvard Classics, so you will be mightily interested to know that Dr. Eliot has just added a 2-foot shelf of fiction, 20 volumes, to his famous 5-foot shelf of books. It is called the Harvard Classics Shelf of Fiction. In it are 45 of the most famous novels of the greatest writers of all time. 7 different countries are represented: Russia, France, England, Germany, Spain, Scandinavia, and America, each by its most noted authors, each author by his best stories. So good are these wonderful romances of fiction and history, so great has been their influence, that they can truly be called an essential part of the reading of every 20th century American. They supplement and round out the Harvard Classics, covering as they do a field almost untouched in the original 5-foot shelf of books. Special offer to Harvard Classics owners. A special edition of the Harvard Classics Shelf of Fiction has been made up for Harvard Classics owners. Because of its wealth of criticisms, sketches, and essays by noted authorities, it has been called the Commentator's Edition. While it lasts, we can offer you the complete set of the Harvard Classics shelf of fiction in 20 volumes, bound in silk cloth, gold stamped, at a saving of 44% compared with Brentano's actual quotation reproduced on the back of this letter, and payable in just a few months by very small monthly payments, or with a discount for cash. Examine the books for a week, at our expense. Don't take our word for the value and interest of these great stories. Don't take as final the judgment of Dr. Chas W. Eliot, President Emeritus of Harvard University and probably the greatest authority on books and reading in the world today. Examine the books for yourself. Read in your own home one or two of the 45 wonderful stories. Then decide. It costs you nothing to see the books. The enclosed card will bring them to you for a week's examination. Send no money. Merely ask to see these stories that Dr. Eliot has selected for you. The 20th century busy man from out of all the fiction of the world. The enclosed card brings them. Put your name and address on it now and drop in the mail. But remember, this special offer to Harvard Classics owners holds good only until the Commentator's Edition is exhausted, so drop your card in the mail now. Yours very truly. Later follow-ups on the fiction books considerably increased the percentage of sale, but all depended for their effectiveness upon their tie-up with the interest already created by the Harvard Classics, so they seem hardly worthy of inclusion here. Much better from the point of view of a good piece of mail selling was our folder offering the Junior Classics, the 2-foot shelf of books for children. Imagine how such an approach as this would appeal to the parents of any growing youngster. You know how the little folks just love a good story? How they'd rather listen to one than eat or play or sleep? How they beg you sometimes to tell them a story, to read to them? What parent has not had that experience? What parent will not nod his head in agreement with every word? You have your reader's interest. Now you point out what he will also agree with, that the children will read something, and it is what they read now that has the greatest influence on their afterlife. It is their heroes, the men and women who are made to seem to them wonderful and worthy to pattern after, who form your children's characters. How important, then, that they should have the right reading, and here is the chance to get for them the 846 best stories for children from the literature of the whole world, picked by 2 famous educators, Dr. Eliot and Dr. Nielsen. From there on, proof, persuasion, bargain, and free trial follow in swift succession. Everything is made easy, which is probably the reason this folder pulled as high as 8% on some lists. Here is the folder itself. You know how the little folks just love a good story, how they'd rather listen to one than eat or play or sleep, how they beg you sometimes to tell them a story, to read to them. They will read something, and it's what they read now that determines what they are to be. It's their heroes, their ideals, the men and women who are made to seem to them wonderful and worthy to pattern after, that form your children's characters, that have the greatest influence on their afterlife, that spell the difference frequently between success and failure. If you could pick out from all the literature of the world just the stories of folklore and fable, just the tales of fiction and history, just the poems, that would give your children the right ideals, that would stimulate them to their best efforts, that would give the best groundwork for their later studies. And if you could have the advice of the best read man and the greatest educator of his day as to that reading, you'd feel that no price was too high to pay for it. You can get just those stories, tales, and poems, 846 of them, gone over by the best read man and the greatest educator of his day, Dr. Charles W. Eliot, for 40 years, president of Harvard University, approved and endorsed by him. They are bound up into 10 volumes, and you'll find Dr. Eliot's suggestions as to the training of your children in his introduction to the set. The 846 Best Stories for Children from the Literature of the World. All that is best in mythology and folklore, fairy tales and legends, historical romances of chivalry, stories of courage and daring, animal and nature stories. In short, all that is best in the literature of childhood from every race and every land is included in these junior classics. Stories that the first mothers told at nightfall to their little ones, the folk tales and myths of the far north country, the briar rabbit stories of our own Southland. The tales of Greece and Rome have a volume to themselves, and in them the child comes to know as familiar friends the great characters who, in high school days, he will meet again between the covers of textbooks. Then follow the stories of the heroes and heroines of chivalry. Shakespeare's heroes and heroines, too, are here in selected plays, retold and rearranged to make easy reading for children. Alice in Wonderland is in the company, and Robinson Crusoe and Joan of Arc and Evangeline. The stories that never grow old are here, Aladdin and Sinbad the Sailor, and the heroes and heroines of Scott's best stories. Scores, literally hundreds of the wonderful people of childhood. They are all here, ready to become the delightful associates of your own boy and girl. Save $30 and have the best. There are 846 stories, poems, tales, and essays in the Junior Classics. The children's 2-foot shelf of books, a story each night at bedtime for nearly 3 years. Purchased separately in the various bindings of the original publishers, these 846 masterpieces would cost $30 more than the price we asked for them in uniform bindings. The best product of the bookmaker's art, bound up into 10 volumes in durable cloth binding. The price of these 846 stories, tales, and poems is only $16, payable at the rate of $1 a month. Bound in 3/4 autumn leaf leather, the price is $24, payable $1.50 a month, a discount of 10% being allowed for full cash payment. Each of the 10 volumes has its colored frontispiece, a reproduction of a celebrated painting, and there are scores of illustrations, an art education in themselves. The 846 masterpieces have been arranged by Professor Nielsen, head of the English department at Harvard University, in reading courses which make them a real training in the appreciation of great literature and a stepping stone to the classics of the adult world. A home training planned by the greatest educators to develop character and ensure success. That is the Junior Classics in a single sentence, and sold at less than a third of what the individual parts would cost. My mother never read to me. Pity the man or woman who, looking back over life's journey, must say, "My mother never read to me." To him, one of the richest joys of existence has been denied. Schoolwork would have been easier, life's tasks more meaningful had there been the background of idealism and mental uplift gained in his first plastic years in his own home. It is for the boy or girl who covets this rich experience, for the parent who wants to draw close to his or her child through the pages of great literature but who is perplexed as to just what or how to read, that the Junior Classics is offered. "Give me a child until he is 7 years old," said Cardinal Newman, "and I care not who has him after." Give your boy or girl for the first years of his life to the great ideals and noble thoughts of literature. Make his or her heroes not the rude figures of the Sunday supplements, but the great characters, men and women, who have made history. Fill his or her mind with such images and ideals, and you need not worry for the future. It was to do this for the mothers and fathers and children of America that the leading educators of America gave of their best to the Junior Classics, and that Dr. Eliot agreed to lend his splendid reputation and influence to their success. There is no university like a mother's reading to her child. There is no university, says a celebrated authority, like a mother's reading to her child. That is the inspiration of the Junior Classics. For if mother or father who cares what his child might become, who cares, that is, as much as 3 cents money and 5 minutes of time a day, this splendid library lifts an enormous burden. For here, authoritatively selected and scientifically arranged, are the works that for generations have proved their power to mold character, make schoolwork easier, ensure success. Henry Clay said, "A wise mother and good book enabled me to succeed in life. She was very poor, but never too poor to buy books for her children. It is a mean sort of poverty that starves the mind to feed the body. Did you ever hear the story of the youngest governor Minnesota ever had? The late Governor John A. Johnson? He was talking one day of his start in life. The man who influenced my career more than any other, he said, lived in our little hometown. He lent me the right books. He taught me what to read and how. Much of what I am, I owe to that man, and to those books. The right books Because their influence came into the life of that simple small-town boy at the critical period of his boyhood, ambitions were awakened and purposes stirred, which brought him finally to the governor's chair. Without them, he might have been content to remain forever behind the counter of the store where he started work. It was the books coming to him in the molding years of youth that showed him the world and taught him how to conquer it. Dip into the biography of almost any man or woman who has reached success, and you will find this story of good books repeated. Franklin, Jackson, Clay, Lincoln. None of these men ever had the advantage of a good schooling. All of them owed their great success in life to the influence of good books. Examine the books for a week, muck at our expense. Don't take our word for the value and interest of this set. Don't take as final the judgment of Dr. Eliot, the foremost educator of his day. Let us lend you the books for a week without cost and without obligation. Examine them for yourself. Read in your own home a few of the 846 stories and poems in the Junior Classics. Then decide whether these stories will be worth 2 or 3 cents each to your children, in pleasure, in profit, in mental growth. Remember, you are under no obligation to keep them. We send the books to you prepaid for 1 week, to read, to examine, to talk over with your family. If you like them, send us only $1 at the end of the week and $1 a month until the set is paid for. If not, return it without question at our expense. Send no money. Merely ask to see these stories that have been approved for your children by Dr. Charles W. Eliot, President Emeritus of Harvard University, who has directed the training of more successful men than probably any other man in the world. The enclosed card brings them to you. Merely drop it in the mail. After the Junior Classics, we worked our list on half a dozen other sets of books. Principal among them, The Story of the Great War, Lodge's History of Nations, and Shakespeare. Here is a typical letter on the war story written early in 1917, when it looked as though the end might come any minute. After the war, what? Do you know what will probably happen after this world war? Are you familiar with the fundamental conditions which underlie the development and progress of nations? Do you know what actually happened after other wars in England, for instance, after the Napoleonic campaigns? In our own United States after the Civil War? To belligerents and neutrals after the Franco-Prussian War? In international trade after the Russo-Japanese War? Do you know whether peace sends the price of commodities up or down, makes money easy or scarce? Do you know if any nation actually faced bankruptcy or repudiated a war debt, or how war debts affect taxation? How often have you wished that you could speak with authority, backed by absolute knowledge of the real inside facts of this world war, of its probable outcome and its effect upon our trade, our institutions, and our standing? The story of the Great War. What led up to it, how it began, through it all, contains the fact that you as a businessman must know. It tells the full story of this greatest crisis in the world's history, a crisis that affects you and me almost as closely as the nations of Europe. Do you for one moment imagine that any nation or group of nations can contract debts amounting to $60 billion without affecting the entire credit system of the whole world? Do you suppose that 14 million men can be killed, wounded, or lost without affecting labor and capital everywhere? Do you think that the whole map of Europe can be changed without disturbing the even tenor of our ways? This is America's opportunity. War is blazing the way for America to commercial supremacy. However long the war may continue, Europe must eventually reconstruct. Thousands of square miles of territory now in ruins must be rebuilt. Millions upon millions of people must be clothed and fed. You are a businessman. Put the question squarely up to yourself. How much do you really know about the resources of the different countries of Europe, their wealth in men and material and foodstuffs? What likelihood there is of any country being forced to give in? Is Germany really starving? Is revolution likely in Austria or Russia? Can Great Britain be blockaded by submarines? The answers to these questions are all to be found in the 5-volume story of the Great War. Without these answers, how can you form an intelligent opinion as to what will happen? How can you plan ahead for your own business future? Heretofore, we Americans have had a deep sense of self-sufficiency. We haven't had time or inclination to know how the rest of the world lived, but now we must know. England, Germany, and other nations, reaching out after commerce and new markets, studied countries and peoples and conditions. So the American businessman, the manufacturers and the merchant and the salesman must inform himself if he would develop, if he hopes to make the most of present opportunities, the world's great events. 10 volumes. With the 5-volume Story of the Great War, cover the whole history of the world from the dawn of civilization to the present day. The two sets together bring the entire world home to you. They tell you about all the peoples of the earth. They show you many a parallel to the present great struggle in the history of other nations during the past 5,000 years. They bring out the absolutely important facts and figures about every nation that you must know. Not dry facts dryly stated, but thrilling facts told in an intensely interesting narrative that make these histories read like the most enticing of fiction. The leading historians of the world wrote these histories. Into a few attractive, easy reading volumes are condensed all the massive material which in old-time histories occupied many volumes and cost hundreds of dollars. There are 5 copious, richly illustrated volumes in the story of the Great War, beautifully bound in leather, and 10 in the world's great events, bound in a rich dark brown cloth. While the present edition lasts, we can make you a special combination price on these 15 volumes of $2.20 apiece. $33 for the 2 sets payable at the rate of only $1.50 a month, a discount of 10% being allowed for full cash payment. This offer holds good, however, only while the present edition lasts, for paper, ink, and binding are going up by leaps and bounds, and the price of our next edition will have to be raised accordingly. Examine the books for a week. Free. Don't take our word for the value and interest of these great books. Don't take the word of the thousands of scholars and statesmen and businessmen who have bought and commended them. Let us lend the books themselves to you for a week. Free, so you can see for yourself how intensely interesting they are. What a wonderful field they open up to you. Remember, you are under no obligation to keep them. We send them to you by prepaid express for a week's free examination. If you like them, send us $1.50 at the end of the week and only $1.50 a month until paid for. If not, return them without question at our expense. But remember, too, that our present prices will hold only until the stock now on hand is exhausted. Now is the time. After the war is over, anyone can say what the outcome has been, what effect peace has had upon our industries, but hindsight of this kind is seldom very valuable. It is the man who can judge of these things now, the man with foresight who can plan ahead and be ready for the opportunities when they come, that will forge into the front rank of American business and professional men. Now, while every edition of the newspapers is centering your interest on Europe. Now, when the knowledge will be of infinite value to you, is the time to acquire that knowledge, not only of the full story of this war, but of the effects of previous wars on trade and credit and labor and capital. Send no money. Merely ask to see these books that tell all the essential facts in the history of the world in the most interesting and authoritative way imaginable. The card brings them. Drop it in the mail, now, yours very truly. That letter pulled about 3% on our customer list, and about 1% on such lists as doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, and other occupational names. It was mailed under 1-cent postage, so the letter, circular, and card cost only about 2.75 to 3 cents in the mail, which gave us a cost of about $1 an order on a 3% pull, and $3 an order at 1%. Considering that the history sold for $33, there was a goodly margin of profit at both figures. Lodge's history was older and had little of timely appeal, so we did not do so well on it. From the following letter, we got about 1% of orders on our customer list, and from the folder which follows the letter, we got about 3.5% from occupational lists. There was a profit in both these figures, for both letter and folder were very inexpensively done, the letter costing less than 2 cents in the mail, and the folder less than 2.5 cents. But the results did not run into big figures. Here's the letter. 100 years ago, all Europe was in arms against Napoleon. Today, almost the whole world is arrayed against the Kaiser. Napoleon ended his days on the rocky Isle of St. Helena. Will the Kaiser do the same? It is much the same old story. One nation tries to impose its rule by force upon all the others. One man tries to dominate the world. Xerxes, Alexander, Caesar, Napoleon, the Kaiser, all dreamed of world domination. All attained some measure of success. But what was feasible in the times of Alexander and Julius Caesar is utterly impossible in these days of universal enlightenment. The world must and will be made safe for democracy. After the Battle of Waterloo, Belgium and Holland and Luxembourg were set up as neutral states. Do you know why? Have you ever heard the long story of diplomacy and intrigue that lay behind the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente? Do you remember the Agadir incident? Have you ever read an impartial account of the Reconstruction period that our southern states went through after the Civil War? Do you know that many of the states of Europe will have to experience this same Reconstruction after the present war? Do you know that trade and credits and money standards are being affected in much the same way as by previous wars, though, of course, on a vastly greater scale? It is just another case of history repeating itself. All of the various phases of reconstruction and readjustments in commerce and trade and credits can be judged of from the experience of past wars. You can use real foresight. You can safely plan ahead, if you will, but profit by the lessons of history. Now, while every edition of the newspapers is riveting your attention on the problems of the war, now, when the knowledge may be of infinite value to you, is the time to acquire that practical working knowledge of history that the forward-looking American of today must have. In a new kind of history, written for the modern busy man under the supervision of Senator Henry Cabot Lodge of Massachusetts, you will find in interesting narrative form just the essential facts about each nation that you need to know. It is the only collected history of the world that devotes a whole single volume to each of the larger nations, giving fully and in detail the story of each, and it brings that story down to the very opening of the present stupendous struggle. The Lodge History of Nations brings out the absolutely important facts about all the warring nations that you must know to understand the causes and sequence of this greatest struggle in history. It brings out facts and figures about each nation, with statistics and data that cannot be readily or conveniently located elsewhere. Not dry facts dryly stated, but thrilling facts told in an intensely interesting narrative that makes these histories read like the most enticing fiction. The Lodge History of Nations was originally published by the Snow Company of Chicago at prices ranging from $120 a set to $625, and it has never before been sold at less than these figures. However, publishing as we do some 5 million books a year, we have manufacturing facilities that the Snow Company did not have, and because of these, we have been able to print the complete 25 volumes of the Lodge History of Nations on special water. Marked paper from the same plates as the finest deluxe sets, at a price of only $44, two-thirds less than the lowest price named by the Snow Company. And you can pay for the books as you like, even as little as $2 a month. Examine the books for a week, at our expense. Don't take our word for the wonderful value and interest of this great set of histories. Don't take the word of the thousands of satisfied owners. Examine the books yourself for a week in your own home without cost and without obligation. Then decide. And send no money. Merely drop the enclosed card in the mail and the complete set will be sent you immediately at our own expense for a week's examination. If, during that week, you can see where the books will be worth $70 a day to you in pleasure and profit, accept them. If not, return them without question at our expense. But at least ask to see this set that ex-President Andrew D. White of Cornell University calls the best world history by modern historians. Yours very truly. There followed after these Shakespeare, Dumas, different memoirs, and the like. The memoir's letter started with the story of the drummer boy's wife who saved the Tsar and his army from the Turks, hinted at a dozen other interesting incidents of the kind, touched upon de Pompadour, whose true story makes the legend of King Cophetua and the beggar maid seem tame by comparison, and showed how her sinister motto, "After us, the deluge," led logically to the revolution and the reign of terror, just as the rottenness of the Tsars brought similar scenes to Russia more than 100 years later. Needless to say, such stories won reader interest and brought back orders in profitable volume. but none of them compared in sales with the Harvard Classics and Junior Classics. These were our standbys. With the reputation of Dr. Eliot back of them, we were able to go to every country town and hamlet and leave at least a few sets of these sterling works. But accepting on inquiries that the salesmen were unable to sell, we were not allowed to touch the larger towns and cities where most of the population lives and where most of the reading is done. For, contrary to general belief, our experience was that it is far easier to sell the dwellers in the cities by mail than it is the farmer. This is true even of such merchandise as coats, shirts, ties, and other wearing apparel. It is far more true of books, so our sales were limited. It was hard to get highly profitable percentages of orders from telephone books and automobile registrations. The occupational lists paid well, but there were comparatively few of them in the rural communities. While as for the most profitable lists of all, the buyers of other sets published by concerns like the Review of Reviews, Putnam's, Doubleday, etc., we were barred from using them by our geographical restrictions, because they could not take the time to sort over their list and address our circulars only to rural communities. For these reasons, our sales amounted to only about $250,000 a year, when, if we had had the whole country to draw upon, they should have run into the millions. So, when the Review of Reviews offered me the sales managership of their mail selling, I jumped at the chance to show what could be done by mail when all the hobbles were off. And that is the end of Chapter 11. If you would like to grab your copy of the Robert Collier Letter Book, click the link in the description and you will find it available in German, Spanish, and French, alongside many other fundamental marketing books. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more direct response content. See you in the next one.